What's up, guys? It's Ariel and welcome back to another awesome video. Get it? Autism, awesome, awesome. It was worth a shot. I hope you guys are doing well and thank you for joining me today. So let's get to it. In today's video, we will be talking about a term that's frequently overused, but I feel like it's pretty misunderstood in the special needs community. We are going to be talking about sensory. Now, what is sensory? I think it's a little bit different for everyone based off where and how you learned it. So for some, it's shaking up glitter and beans in a bottle. For others, it's a technique used to either calm or alert a child's nervous system. And for others, well, it's just confusing. So today we are going to go over everything that you need to know in terms of sensory. Let's get started. What is sensory? It actually stems from our senses. Sight, the ability to see. Touch, our ability to feel. Taste, which is really important when we're trying to eat. Hearing, and we can't forget our sense of smell. Oh, my brother definitely wiped his armpits with this one. Did you know that the sensory system is a lot more complex than that? It actually goes deeper. There's something called proprioception, which is body awareness and where our body is in space. Then we have the vestibular system, which lives in our inner ear, and it controls lots of our balance. It's good to have good balance. A lot of times, special needs kiddos are wired just a little bit differently. So when they get a new sense, hearing a sound that's too loud or being introduced to a new food and they taste it and they don't like it, they won't respond the same way that we do. We are able to communicate those messages from our brain when we don't like something and say, okay, this isn't for me. Let's push it aside. Some of our kids, however, may display a behavior that looks something like this. And some of you may not have any challenges at all, and that's okay. We're going to talk about the difference between over and under responders. Tell me, which category do you feel that your child falls into? Here's how you tell. Think back to when you used to have your kiddos watch Winnie the Pooh. For anyone who might not know what he looks like, I'll give you a description. He's got two really cute little ears, kind of chubby, skin is yellow. I mean, my skin's not yellow, but Winnie the Pooh and I kind of look the same. If your child is an over-responder, these are some of the things that you might see. And remember, it varies from kiddo to kiddo, but think about Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. Perfect example. Always bouncing around, can't sit still, constantly fidgety, always alert. We cannot calm them down. Sound familiar? When you have kiddos that can't sit still, especially during the day and age of virtual learning and telehealth appointments and everything else that basically requires us to sit still and focus, I know that it can be frustrating, but this is where that sensory word comes into play. What's happening there is our brain is sending out a signal to our bodies. Hey, we need to get up and move. We got to get going. Think of it as a flashing red light in your child's mind that's telling them, we cannot sit still. We need to get up. Something is not right. After the brain sends out that message, we are going to then act on that impulse. That's naturally just what we do. So you can see anything from kids getting up and wiggling or kicking or fidgeting, always moving their hands. They might seem a bit restless. Again, hopefully that gave you a little bit more insight. They're not doing it because they're defiant and don't want to listen. They're doing it because their brain is sending out a message saying their body's not getting enough input to their muscles and joints. So in order to try to act on that impulse, as we naturally would, we're going to wiggle and shimmy and squirm until we can get that red light flashing in our brain to stop. Another term for our kiddos who are always on the go is sensory seeker. Your sensory seeker is someone who is always going and touching and jumping and bouncing. Think back to the example we just talked about. That would definitely be a sensory seeker, but some may actually call this a sensory over responder, because a typical child may get that same impulse in their brain and they don't act on it the same way. These kiddos, they act on it right away, and it may be a little bit of a heightened response than your typical child would get. The best thing to do for kiddos who can't sit still during the day when you need them to sit still like now is to provide them with a sensory diet. Sensory diets are often provided by skilled occupational therapists or therapy assistants who are trained professionals in that field. Now, I will be doing an upcoming video to show you some tips and tricks to help you with all things heavy work, but for now, let's talk about the under responders, or in some cases, the sensory avoiders. If I have a kiddo who is a sensory underresponder, or some may call it a low arousal kiddo, here are some things that you might see. Think about Eeyore from my Winnie the Pooh example. Now, Eeyore may seem depressed, but we're not thinking about the diagnosis. We are going to talk about what we see as a result of what's going on. I think he's the perfect example to describe a low arousal kiddo. These kiddos may require increased time to respond to a question or to their name. They may seem disengaged and may have a flat affect. Now, flat affect just means it's very monotone throughout the whole face. So it would look something like this. Everything is just flat and said in one tone, and I may need extra time to respond to your questions. If I were to go through the video like this, I'm sure that you guys would assume that something was wrong. Remember, don't judge a book by its cover. We're all different. These kiddos may also seem unaware or respond a bit delayed when they hear a loud noise, or if they have something they don't like maybe they're trying a new food and don't like the taste of it. It may take them a little bit longer to tell you. Let me give you an example. They taste the new food, you ask them how it tastes, they may just kind of sit there and seem disengaged or withdrawn or shy away from it. That's typically what we see in our underresponders. What's going on in your low arousal kiddo's mind? Think about that flashing light that we had earlier that was going super fast for our overresponders. Now, our body's getting a different cue. For our low arousal kiddos, it's a flashing light, but think of it going a lot less fast. The key is coming out, but it took a little bit longer. Yes, Mom, I'll get to it. We weren't trying to ignore you, and we're not trying to be defiant in any way. It just took us a little bit longer to respond. We just need someone to help us wake up our brain and our body. My go-to for an underresponder is going to be, you guessed it, a sensory diet. But sensory diets for our over and our underresponders would in no way be the same. For our underresponders, we are going to do more activities that are going to wake up their brains and their bodies. I will do an entire video on alerting the brain and body, but now that we know about the senses and different things you might see from an over and an under responder, let's talk about triggers, especially in our household. So imagine our over responders. That red light's going off, we are hearing something and our brain is sending out a signal and we don't know how to interpret that information. Things that can cause that trigger, a loud noise, the blender, vacuum cleaner, for some, toilet flushes. Things like this will typically cause your child to run around, be upset, be emotional, not able to express that this sound is causing them discomfort in a way that we don't really know how to explain. For our underresponders, they may not even notice that you're using these items at all. Think about our senses the next time you go into a grocery store. Now, I'm not asking you never to take your kid in a store again. No, that's not functional. We want to teach them and gradually expose them to these environments so that they know it's okay. But what I am asking is to stop and think about it. Think about our senses. When you go into a grocery store, it's loud, it's crowded, there's lots of color, there's bright lights, there's so many different things to touch, and you want us to just be still and sit in a grocery cart? Sorry, I take it a little bit personal. Grocery stores can be a mess. I worked at a grocery store for 2 years before going to school. In our next video, you are going to learn all about how to regulate that overresponder, the red light that's flashing way too fast, causing us to have a hard time sitting and focusing. You're going to learn how to wake up the brain and body of that kiddo who may be an underresponder. Our next video will be all about sensory diets and what you can do at home to help.